The more discretion the representatives have, the easier it is to enact legislation, and the less guarantee that there is that the laws enacted will reflect the beliefs of the majority. In the United States, every 2 years, the citizens in each congressional district are given the opportunity to vote for a candidate for the House of Representatives. Twice every 6 years, they can vote for a senatorial candidate. And once every 4 years, they can vote for a slate of delegates to the Electoral College, who traditionally will vote for the presidential and vice presidential candidates to whom they are pledged. The congressional and senatorial candidates who get the most votes, and the presidential candidate and his running mate who get the majority of the Electoral College votes, win the contest. In what sense can these representatives be said to speak for the majority? Suppose Mr. Blue, Mr. Pink, and Mr. Yellow are running in your district for election to the House of Representatives. Suppose that the only issues you personally care about are number 1, abortion, you're against it. Number 2, military spending, you think it's too high. Number 3, free speech, you think everyone should have freedom of expression, even pornographers and racists. Number 4, government handouts to the idle rich, you're against it. And number 5, standard shift automobiles, you can't operate them and you think they should be outlawed for safety. You find that you agree with Mr. Blue on abortion and handouts. You agree with Mr. Pink on military spending and free speech. You don't know where Mr. Yellow stands on any issues, but you think he'll try to pretty much keep things the same, not change the existing laws very much. Nobody even addresses your pet peeve standard shift cars. None of these candidates can truly represent you on all 5 issues. If Mr. Blue is elected, you think you might try to turn the country into a garrison state. If Mr. Pink is elected, you think you might try to put more people on the dole, raise taxes, and just ruin the economy. If Mr. Yellow is elected, you fear he'll continue the country's mindless drift toward the abyss. So you decide that the only one who can represent your views is yourself, and you write your own name on the ballot. Suppose miraculously you win the election, and you're now a member of the House of Representatives. Can you vote so as to accurately represent your own views now? No. For example, one of the most important things congressmen have to vote on is the federal budget. They do not vote on individual items. They vote on appropriation bills that are as thick as the Manhattan telephone directory. So how do you as a congressman represent yourself when asked to vote on an appropriation bill that includes less money for abortion, more money for the Pentagon, more money for handouts to the poor, and more money for handouts to the rich? Voting in the House of Representatives is arranged so that the congressmen cannot even represent themselves, much less anybody else. In an American presidential election, approximately 60% of the population is eligible to vote, and of these, about 55% bother to vote. Perhaps the people who don't vote have come to realize the futility of it. If a presidential candidate gets 60% of this vote, as Lyndon Johnson did in 1964, it's called a landslide. But a landslide of 60% of the popular vote means that only 33% of the eligible voters and 19.8% of the population voted for the winner. Of the 19.8 who voted for Lyndon Johnson, many voted for him because they were afraid of his opponent, rather than because they agreed with Johnson's views. Many of those who voted really had no knowledge of the candidate's views and what the issues really were. Those who did have an understanding of the issues and definite opinions about them had to decide which candidate agreed with them on more issues. This is not an easy thing to do. All that Lyndon Johnson's election proved was that 19.8 of the population, after listening or not listening to the candidate's campaign promises, chose to vote Johnson. It did not prove that they believed Johnson would represent their views. The same sort of conclusion could be reached with respect to every other presidential or congressional election. For a more recent example, take Barack Obama. Barack Obama won a landslide victory in promising to bring transparency to the White House. Once he was in office, he claimed state secrets. Many who voted for him felt betrayed, but they should have known. Now let's assume, for the sake of further analysis, that all the members of Congress represent the majority of their constituents. Does it follow from this that the opinions of the majority will be reflected in the laws? To answer this question, we need to understand how legislation is enacted. Laws are enacted when a majority of the legislators vote for a bundle of proposals, most of which they don't understand. The number of bills voted on these days is so great that a legislator cannot possibly read them all or understand them all before voting on them. Because legislators don't know the provisions of many proposed laws. They can't base their votes on the majority views of their constituents. They can't even vote on their own views. They're forced to rely on other considerations to determine which way they vote. They consider their own political interests first. So they make deals with each other, and they make deals with special interest groups. They vote for legislation favored by those who promise to support them in the next political campaign. Or they take bribes. This is the fallacy of representative government. This is the nature of what is euphemistically called representative government.